Well, thank you for staying with us, and definitely I would say happy Democracy Day. 14 years and counting, or should I say we're blessed. But we're looking at 14 years of democracy in Nigeria, and Reverend Jesse Jackson speaks. Now, 14 years ago, the Nigerian military returned to the barracks after handing over to an elected civilian government.
And since then, there have been peaceful transition through election after the 2 terms of 8 years of retired General Olusegun Obasanjo as president to Alhaji Umar Yaradua, who died in office, and he handed over to the incumbent Dr. Goodluck Obele Jonathan.
First President Jonathan implemented an electoral reform such produced, and of course we saw, which did not go through severe litigation as in the past.
Yeah, and secondly, that reform led to the election of Jonathan, and transparent enough to show that he was widely accepted by the electorate. More than that, the president put in place a blueprint called the Transformation Agenda, designed to revive all sectors of the economy. Apart from that, the current administration has been working hard to deepen democracy and democratic values by allowing the independence of the legislature and the judiciary.
Well, this Wednesday, I beg your pardon, we'll be discussing the 14 years of democracy in Nigeria from the point of view of a well-renowned American civil rights leader, authoritative voice in American politics, and supporter of democracy and development in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Reverend Jesse Jackson. You're welcome, sir.
Good to be with you today.
Good to have you in our studios.
Homecoming.
Yes, very well. Now, like we said earlier, it's been 14 years since the military handed over to civilian rule in Nigeria. How would you describe the Nigerian democracy?
Well, it's a good thing that the Nigerian democracy has taken root. The civilian leadership elected by the people has its appropriate place. The military has its place. This has been a very difficult state to manage because of the sheer size of Nigeria and diversity of Nigeria. Nigeria is 1/4 of the African population. Its wingspan touches 1/2 of the entire African population. And the many languages and tribal groupings, and yet somehow you molded it into a one Nigeria, and that was not an easy thing to accomplish, but now you have more democracy, you have more stability, you have no growth, and so you owe much of that to President Goodluck Jonathan and to the people who will democracy to be real in their lives.
Now, you know, when I remember you far back as 1965 when you went to that match with, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And of course, you being the African, you know, mission envoy to Africa, you must have had quite a lot of experiences with other African countries. You were speaking earlier about Liberian visit and all of that. Now, let's look at, you know, the military rule in Nigeria. Now, Nigeria was ruled for many years by the military and was able to organize peaceful transition 4 times. How significant is this democratic development of the African continent?
It's maturing. You know, the U.S., our first president was General George Washington. Mm-hmm. And so democracy was defined by led by a general. And then you had 246 years of slavery mm-hmm. and democracy, quote unquote, coexisting, which is not reality, but and then you had a season, another 100 years where blacks and women could not vote. But we kept maturing, and so as of 1965, really just 48 years ago, blacks got the right to vote, democracy got bigger, women got the right to serve on juries, it got bigger, 18-year-olds got the right to vote, it got bigger, students on campuses could vote on campus, it got bigger. Proportionality, now you get votes according to your proportion, not absolute numbers. It got bigger. Mm-hmm. So part of the mission, once you leave the fears of slavery and colonialism and occupation, is democracy. It's the highest and most mature form of governance, because in democracy you govern with the consent of the governed. You're not governing by the lineage of some king. Mm-hmm. Or some despot or some military general who's dealing with power and arbitrariness. You're dealing with, so in a democracy, people do matter because every vote matters and everybody matters.
Okay. Yeah, well, let's look at the electoral reform that we have in Nigeria. Before the death of the late President Yaradua, he instituted a committee to find out how Nigeria can actually transit successfully during elections. the analysts have actually said that this process has led to reduced disputes in Nigeria, electoral disputes. What's your view?
Well, the struggle with ending disputes is an ongoing one. In the U.S., for example, we had an election in 2000 where Al Gore got more votes than George Bush. The winner lost and the loser won because of a technicality in 2000. In 2004, you had an election where a substantial number of votes were not counted. This last election had an attempt to suppress the vote and manipulate the vote by creating standards that made it more difficult for common people to vote. So the struggle for power within a democracy seems to be ongoing. But here you are moving toward more democracies, more elections of democracy accepted by the people. And when you begin to move away from tribalism and away from Christians versus Muslim, North versus South, begin to elect leaders based upon their commitment to one Nigeria. That's the ultimate victory, is the idea that if you're in the U.S. or in Britain, he's a Nigerian, you don't know whether Yoruba or Igbo. I mean, you really do not know. But the identity of one Nigeria and of all the things that can be said in these 36 states, is that you must keep fighting for the identity that connects you. That there are numerators. I am from Borno State. I am from Bayelsa State. I'm from River State. But the common denominator is Nigeria, and your strength lies in the strength of a strong federal government. States have their place and have their rights. In the end, a strong central government is the key to stability.
No, I think I remember far back as history. I think in 1984, Noah Robinson said something in New York Times, and he said he remembers you, and of course that you wanted to help people through the rivers of the waters. And then you went on to win the Medal of Freedom, 2000 Presidential Medal of Freedom. Now, for a man who knows what freedom is and who knows the fight for it, you look at the three arms of government for Nigeria. You have the judiciary, you have the legislature, and you have the executive. How important are these three arms for development in the Nigerian continent?
You know, I appreciate freedom because I'm aware of what it was like to not have it. You know, I grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, the south of our country. My father in World War II came home and had to sit behind Nazi prisoners of war on American military bases. He came from fighting a war for democracy and came back home and could not vote. I was arrested in 1960 trying to use a public library, you know, on freedom. We could not drive a bus, you know, on freedom. And so the unfreedom helps you to appreciate freedom. Now you can go in a hotel, motel, place you choose. When Dr. King gave the address in Washington in 1963, all people here by I Have a Dream, what they miss is that day, from Texas across to Florida up to Maryland, people of color, we couldn't use a single public toilet. The day he gave that speech, our money was counterfeited. We could not buy ice cream at Howard Johnson's, a restaurant. We could not rent a room at Holiday Inn. They gave this speech. They gave this speech. We could not, as a people, vote. And so he dreamed beyond our predicament. If we kept marching and kept fighting, remained nonviolent in our discipline, that one day we would achieve. And so, and you think about 1963, the March on Washington, 50 years ago, and that President Barack Obama has been elected twice, we never stopped fighting. We got a public accommodation bill to wipe out states abusing their rights, to deny us the right to vote. We got the right to vote in 1965, and life has changed. Life is before and after the right to vote, the right to participate. Now you begin to get people beginning to learn to vote across lines of race and gender and region, because our country was so badly divided north and south, and given the Civil War. But now people begin to vote beyond race, beyond region, and no doubt there'll be at some point in time an American woman as president. Beyond gender, we'll keep voting.
Yeah. How vital is this kind of struggle, you know, to the three arms of government? We have the legislature, we have the executive, and we have the judiciary. How vital is this kind of struggle?
Well, they must be independent. These three branches must be independent. And part of what they must do is to have also separation of powers and checks and balances. Okay. That is the key to the whole thing, is checks and balances. And stop the abuse of power and stop the corruption, because man is inclined to push everything to the limits. But limits are determined by a judiciary, the laws of a legislative, or the leadership of the executive. So so key to the country's growth now is you move towards military, and even most Nigerians I know don't even fear military rule. Now, they know that's kind of beyond military rule. Now you must somehow hook up. Christians, Muslims must find common ground. Whatever we live in our faith. We live under the law. Whatever your faith may be, we live under the law, and therefore we must appreciate each other's religious freedom, and not be guilty of burning churches and burning mosques. There is no future in violence. There is no future in violence. When somebody gets the root of pain, there is no future in violence.
All right. Now, when you look at the story of Africa as a whole, major stories coming out of Africa seems to be the bastion of corruption. You know, and then until we get rid of corruption, perhaps we might not have the food development that we need in Africa. But let's look at Nigeria. What do you think?
Well, you know, the corruption was the slave trade, 246 years. The corruption was occupation by foreign forces. The corruption was colonialism. Now we're into another called democracy. Democracy on this continent is 1957. 56 years ago with Nkrumah in Ghana.
Okay.
And so with these 56, we've been learning, you know, when you think about Nigeria, about 60 years old, America, what was America at age 60? We were buying and selling people. What was Britain at age 60? Buying and selling people. You're not doing that. Now the fact is, where there is corruption, it must be stopped, because the people. You measure the character of a personal armed nation by how it treats the least of these. Nigeria is too rich in resources to have so many poor people. So there must be a commitment to wipe out poverty, afford for every Nigerian drinkable water, a decent house, a wage and benefit. Those who govern, with the consent of the governed, shouldn't live much better than those that they govern. A democracy is bottom up. It's not just top down, and so this country is so this is the Garden of Eden. You have everything. You have the water, you have the oil, you have the gas, you have rich soil, you have very brilliant people. This is the Garden of Eden, and in this garden there must be peace and justice. In that Garden of Eden, Shell cannot have gas flares.
Well, you said something in the sermon. You said nobody can save us from us but us. And, you know, you talk about resources in Nigeria being a big Garden of Eden. How do we do this? How can the leaders work closely with the people to achieve this?
Well, you certainly do not want an outside force determining the character of your people or of the nation. And so, if nobody can say, who has the power to stop Shell from shooting up gas flares, which they would not do in America? Who has the power to stop Shell and Chevron from spilling oil that's destroying fish, wildlife, and people? The people have that power and must use their power to that end. Who has the power to elect leaders? The people. Or to diselect them if they don't do the right thing. You have that power. And so using your power constructively. And what you don't not have is time to be bogged down in violence, because it is such a distraction. You look at the global news and you see Nigeria and a war in the north of sorts. Let me submit to you that Africa, take a step back, is the largest continent on earth. You can put China, Europe, and America, and Africa and have some land space left. It's the most resourceful continent on earth. Africa, its growth now is number 2 only to China. Within 2 years, Africa's growth will be greater than China's. That's a big deal. 7 of the 10 fastest growing nations in the world are in Africa. Sunrise, as Africa is facing sunrise, we are breaking old ancient bonds of slavery, occupation, colonialism, one leader rule, despotism. We're moving toward democracy. It takes some time to develop the most mature state, because democracy is driven by the consciousness of the people. What people tolerate will determine what will be put upon them. What you tolerate will determine what quality of life you'll have.
Okay, there's been reports that by 2015, Nigeria will cease to exist as one entity, one country, we had that prediction based on some of the challenges that the country has been facing.
I don't believe that. I think that Nigeria is getting strong and closer, not apart. Those who predict Nigeria will come apart in 2015, they're not worth dignifying. Nigeria will get stronger. I mean, the North and South will get stronger. President Goodluck Jonathan is now diversifying your economy beyond just oil and gas, agriculture, business. Nigeria is now the number 5 export of oil in the whole world. Now, once Nigeria fights to get refineries, it doesn't make sense for you to be exporting gas and oil and then trying to buy gas from other countries. There are 2 or 3 non-functioning refineries here, but the fact is, if Nigeria uses its power to develop its, and if Shell and Chevron are going to be partners, they're going to be partners and help to rebuild the refineries. For example, you cannot have, over a long period of time, you cannot have very rich people and very poor people not have a kind of revolution. That's why even when you have these conflicts, at the end of the day, you must find political solutions to security issues, but driven by some sense of moral purpose.
Okay, so how can Nigeria actually deepen its democracy to be able to harness some of its resources and, of course, avoid the issues of conflicts?
One thing Nigeria is exporting is not just oil, but people. Some of the most brilliant physicians in America are Nigerians. My next door neighbors, 2 man and woman, both are. She has a PhD. He's a medical doctor. Because so long as people with this brilliance, once they go away, they find a better way of life, they tend not to come back. So you're exporting people. But the honeybee must feed the flower it robs. Those who are blessed to get the good education must bring it back, and they must recycle that education. But when they come back home, there must be a place for them. People with these kind of opportunities, there must be a place for them at home. And that means that you must have if too few people own too much, and too many have too little, you have not just in a east-west gap, you have a north-south gap. And every time I go up into the Niger country and see all this oil pumping and unpaved roads, there must be a commitment. Every road should be paved. Every child should have